I try to put them in buckets. Is this a people problem or is it a process problem? And probably the easiest diagnostic test is if you fixed the person. If you think it's a people problem and it's like, I just got the wrong person in the seat doing the job. If that person were gone tomorrow, if I could replace them, get rid of them, or magically make them better overnight, does the problem go away?
Welcome to Keep What You Earn, the show for business owners who want to scale profitably and build a business that's actually worth something. My name's Shannon Weinstein, and I run a fractional CFO firm to help seven-figure aesthetics and wellness practices scale with clarity, cash flow, and confidence without burning out or guessing their way into growth. Each week, you'll hear practical CFO insights, real stories about scaling and exiting, and clear financial strategies designed to help you understand what's holding your business back and how to fix it. If you want to follow along with the exact framework that we use with our clients, sign up for the free 5-part video series for aesthetics practice owners, where I walk you through the financial building blocks required to scale your practice and increase enterprise value. You'll find the link in the show notes. Hey everyone, welcome back to Keep What You Earn. Today, I am so excited to introduce you to my friend, Amy Anderson. And Amy, I'll let you introduce yourself, but I met Amy several times at different conferences over the last year, and hearing her speak, I knew I had to have her on the show to talk to you guys because the stuff she says is so effing true. And I wish more people listened to it. So I'm going to make you guys listen to it today. Amy, say hi to everybody.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Shannon.
Of course. Tell them a little bit about what you specialize in so we know what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. So I'm the founder of ACG Practice Partners, and we're a consulting and training firm. We work exclusively with aesthetic practices. And so we are highly focused on operations. So I like to say we support the people and the processes that help drive your whole practice and ultimately your profitability.
Yeah. And I think that, being that we come from finance and the show is driven a lot through finance, we also touch on operations a lot. Mm-hmm. And I like to say operations is just finance without dollar signs.
Oh, I like that. You're so right. They're
the same thing.
Yes, they're so interconnected. You
sisters.
Can't have one without the other. So I love it.
Yeah. I think finance just puts operations to currency that actually associates with it. But I think they're actually a very similar science. So I'm excited to dig in. And part of operations, as we know, I think the biggest part of operations is people and is managing your practice from the provider standpoint. And this is something that it's driven a lot of the topics you've talked about. I know you cover more than just the people side, but there's a lot of content that you're speaking to around managing people and building culture and building a practice around your team. And that's what I want to dig into with you today about really, like, fundamentally, guys, as business owners, we can't avoid people problems. We can't avoid it. Like, you're not going to be immune from it. There's no pill. There's no shot. There's no shortcut away from the people stuff. It sucks, but we got to figure out how to navigate it. So Amy, what's your best advice for people who just feel like they have a lot going on? They're feeling like this is a people and provider problem that's holding their business back from growth. Maybe it's turnover. Maybe it's feeling like the provider's taking all the money and they want to get paid more. What are the big things that you're hearing from practice owners and how they're addressing it?
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right that the people component is something we all deal with. And anytime I'm speaking with a practice owner, whether they're thinking about starting a practice or they're in the middle of it, it's the people are the hardest part of the whole practice ownership, the whole business ownership component.
No matter the industry, I agree with that.
Any industry, and no matter if you're brand new or 30 years in, the people are the hardest part. And at the same time, we can't do what we do without our people. And so they're also the most important part. And so as much as I'd love to say it gets easier, you might develop some systems and processes and mindset or in a way that makes it easier, but it will forever be part of your business. And so the first part of that is just kind of accepting that, putting your head around it, that we will always be working through people issues. And so we got to get comfortable with it. We got to lean into it. Avoiding it is never going to be a solution. It's never going to be a viable solution. So we've got to figure out how to work with our people.
Yeah. And to be clear, you can avoid certain risky things. There are things you can do, right? There are little things you can do to avoid bad situations. But what we're talking about is you can't overall eliminate the risk of hiring people on your own. There's no such thing as just going zero risk of hiring a person. You have to know how to manage that risk and manage those people effectively. And so when a practice feels really chaotic and it feels like everything is, you know, my providers want to get paid more, I don't have the cash flow, they're leaving and I've invested all this training in this person and they're leaving now. What is some of the advice you give in diagnosing and also treating, diagnosing and treating that problem effectively for the practice rather than just sulking in it?
Yeah. Well, so first and foremost, I do get asked the question a lot, how do I hire providers? And a lot of times they want to ask about like the contract itself. How do I put in clauses that they can't leave me, or then they can't compete, or they can't take patients? And yes, I do want to put that legal hat on and think about how to structure it in a way to protect the business. But honestly, I want to create a work environment where they don't want to leave, that they would have no reason to go somewhere else unless they're moving away, there's a significant life event that happens, and it's not that they want to leave you, it's just life is taking them in a different direction. But so how do I create a culture in my practice that will attract high-performing providers and make them want to stay? And so we do that by, this may be so obvious, but treating them like humans and not like a person, an FTE, I should say person, an FTE, not treating
like a
them
unit, a number.
Yes,
things like
exactly.
that.
I mean, they have a life, they have feelings, they have, personal and professional goals. And so, just getting to know them and appreciate the strengths they bring. Let's acknowledge any limitations. We all look for that unicorn. We don't always get a unicorn. Sometimes we get white horses and, we can make them into that unicorn, but we all have some limitations. And so let's be real and honest about it and not beat each other up for it, but be able to talk openly about where they have some growth opportunity. And then on the compensation side, I mean, I love, Shannon, working with your team and others to put together a good competitive compensation plan so they're rewarded for their hard work and they have transparency. They see that it's fair. One of the number one reasons that providers leave is because they feel like their comp is unfair. And sometimes the plan isn't the problem at all. It's because they don't actually know what it is. And it's like shrouded in secrecy. And then they just get these, extra payments from time to time. And that doesn't feel like I'm really part of a team. I don't feel like I'm a meaningful member of this organization if everything is secretive.
One of the biggest questions that we get as CFOs is, when am I ready to expand? When am I ready to exit? Unfortunately, it is a complicated question, but the answer can be simplified into a framework that we've developed that helps identify the 5 financial vital signs that are indicating if you're ready for expansion into new locations or possibly an exit. You can find the link to the video series in the show notes that walks you through the simplified framework and helps you identify the biggest thing in your way to those goals. I agree. I've been using this analogy lately with my practice owners to say, okay, imagine you went back to college and the first day at school, what do you normally get? You get this thing like a syllabus, right? The syllabus lays out a lot of stuff on, you're going to have this many exams. You're going to be graded 20% on class participation, 60% on your exams and 20%, whatever. Then you go through the course of the semester and everything happens as it was laid out to you pretty much. Well, what if you never got that? What if you showed up in class and then 6 months later, no exams, no quizzes, no homework? What if somehow, like whatever it is, 4 months later, you show up to your last day and they hand you a grade? What the hell was I graded on this whole time? And it was like a D. And you go, what? I was never given the guide on what I was graded on. And I said, a lot of practice owners are doing that to people. And not knowing it, because we don't really kind of like architect this in our heads.
Right.
But you have to be thinking about Is it clear that they know what they're graded on? And do they actually have influence over those things?
Right. That's so smart. And that goes beyond compensation, right? That's starting with a job description. And
Yeah.
so at ACG Practice Partners, we do a lot of, when we're working with an existing practice, we're going to do an assessment of kind of your HR structure. Do you have job descriptions for every employee? This is not because it's a checkbox in a compliance column. It's because this is a communication tool. This is how we're communicating exactly what you said. It's like the course syllabus. This is how we communicate what your expectations are, what success looks like in this role, and how you're going to be measured. Now, compensation will have a component to it depending on the role they're in, but it all starts with that job description. And this isn't something I would say, just ask ChatGPT to write it for you or pull a template. I mean, yes, you could start there. We've got bazillions of templates, but what does it actually mean in your practice? Another mistake we see happen often is we hire an employee who previously worked maybe in another plastic surgery office or another med spa. And so we assume, whoa, she was a patient care coordinator in that office. Great. She just knows what I expect of a patient care coordinator in this office. It is not the same. There is not, one size fits all. What the tasks and duties are look different. Are you managing leads, or are you just meeting with consults in office? What is the follow-up? Are you actually coordinating the details of surgery if it's a surgical coordinator, or does that get handed off? I mean, I could go on and on about the differences in the same title of a role and how it looks different in two different practices. So starting with a really specific job description where you are clear on what you expect from the role, so then you can communicate it to that employee.
Yeah. And I think a lot of folks combine mentally the employment agreement with the job description. I treat them as distinct, separate things, where I look at the employment agreement as like the terms of our relationship, and the description is much more verbose, much more descriptive, where you can go into those details if possible so that it's clear what the expectations are. And what I recommend, and I do personally, is I do a 30-day check-in on onboarding and then a 60-day, what I call job description reconciliation with my new hire, to go pull up the initial job description they applied for and be like, is this really what you're doing? Or do you think this is accurate? Let's talk about it. Because I think that's one of the biggest things that comes up is what you initially thought you wanted and what their skills are displaying can deviate. And you may actually like it, but maybe that's actually not their title anymore. And maybe we have to make a shift there. What's your thought on that?
I love that. I've never considered calling it a reconciliation, but you're exactly right, because
Accounting.
so often, especially in, I know you can't get away from the accounting brain, but especially in small business, which is what we mostly are, most of us are here, our jobs evolve over time, and we tend to have a mixed bucket of duties on each person. And I really highly encourage hiring for the person, the skill set, the personality, the culture fit, and then we might adapt the job around it. So to say, this was the job you applied for, but let's check in. Is this what you're doing? And does it make sense? And because it might not be wrong or bad that they're no longer doing that job, but now we need to update the job description to match what we've found, how they fit into the practice, and then identify if we still have gaps that need to be filled, either still with them or with somebody else. So I think that's actually a really excellent way of thinking about it.
Yeah, and I think what it also does too is it aligns you with expectations so that okay, we both agree this is what you're going to get graded on. Okay, next time we reconvene in another 60 days, it's going to be a performance evaluation against these items. So we've already agreed here, and you've signed off on this revised job description. Now this is what you're operating under. And now we can move forward with holding you accountable to all of these things without any ambiguity. I think that's actually where a lot of stuff happens, is where expectations aren't made clear. And there's a communication breakdown between the practice owner and the provider where they don't know what good looks like. And it's hard to distinguish that. So I want to talk a little bit about the measurement of those things. And you mentioned transparency. So I'm interested in this, how much you share in terms of the KPIs, the metrics, and how the practice is doing with your providers in the name of transparency, but what risk can come along with that?
Yeah, this does come up a lot, and some of it is a matter of preference of the practice owner, because I understand we may not want to completely open the books, but my nature is to be more open. So I am okay personally with sharing high level numbers with staff because to me, I can't move this machine without them. And so I want them to know what we're doing and what our goals are. And I also want to hire individuals that are mature enough to understand every top line revenue number, like dollar, that's not going into the business owner's pocket, right? Like we've got some real expenses to take care of. And so from a provider standpoint, I do think they should know what their gross revenue is. I do think they should know what cost of goods are and, how, so that they can appreciate whatever percentage they might be getting is not ever going to be 50%. And here's why. And that, why we just can't off the top start with these giant numbers once they have a real appreciation of what things cost. Same thing with administrative staff, our front desk folks, our patient coordinators, our medical assistants, anybody else who's supporting our providers. I'm personally okay with sharing top level practice revenue in the context of here's where we are, here are our goals. I don't usually go into itemization of expenses because I don't think they necessarily need to know it. But I think it's okay to have an understanding of like things cost a lot of money around here. But I want us all to be, my goal is that we all make a lot of money together. And that if by working together, by working hard, by having efficient processes, by treating our patients well, we can increase our prices and we can all be more successful for that.
I completely agree. My favorite thing to share with providers is margin by treatment, like gross margin by treatment. So they understand what earns the practice the most amount of money. And then we try to message that you, me, if I'm the owner, everybody else is paid from that pot, right? So we're paid from the gross profit. The gross profit you should care about more than the net profit as a provider, because that's what increases the budget to pay you. So if you want raises, it comes from that kitty. So you have to think about, oh, but if I'm doing nothing but injectables appointments that has a 35% gross margin and we're not focused on laser and high energy services that are producing 65% margin, that's why there's no money left. Like that's not no money left, but that's why we have to be frugal. So in a way, if they can understand at least that there are certain treatments, there are certain modalities that make the practice more money. If they simply understand that is enough to drive good behavior. At least in the first layer of it.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. I'm going to take that back myself, Shannon. And
you're all paid from this gross profit number. Let's all win.
Exactly. And then they can understand that. And again, reasonable people understand that there are a lot of mouths to feed and there are a lot of bills to pay from that number. But the more you can increase it, the more we can share that.
Yeah, it's not about what anyone didn't get, right? What profit there is at the end of the day, because everyone believes that you're walking away. If you're the surgeon, you're the owner, you're the practice owner, that we brought in $3 million this year. They think that you're just like Scrooge McDuck swimming in a room full of bills, and it's like, no, you guys cost 2.7.
Right, exactly.
That's how it works, guys. You're expensive, but I think without making it. You can make it more educational on, well, actually, the practice only makes after, labor and materials and things. We're trying to make this much money. And then we use this to pay all the other stuff. That this is the goal we're trying to hit. And if you focus on that higher level, gross profit, that's where it all starts. And that's what they can really influence. I don't want them to obsess over how much we're paying in rent and how much we're paying in subscriptions and how much we're paying the accountant and the legal and that. It's they don't need to know that because they have no influence over that or any stakes in that. But they do have stakes in the top line. So that's why I think you have to connect those things together. Otherwise, they disconnect from it and they feels very I'm confused, I'm distant from it. I don't know.
Yeah. I often think about the right personality, the right fit for a practice, and also the right timing. So where practice is in their growth. So the type of provider I'm looking for on day one is probably different than the one I'm looking 4 or 5 years in, and or as provider number one versus provider number 3, 4, or 5, et cetera. I'll explain that a little bit more. We do a lot of new practice startups. So we help plastic surgeons, med spas start their practices from scratch. I love doing it. It's a ton of work, but it's a lot
so
of fun. It is so much fun.
It's so fun with a blank canvas.
Oh my goodness. I always say I'd rather create things from nothing than like fix all the problems, which we do that too. But no, I love helping people bring their dreams to life because that's what starting a practice is. And the very first provider, let's say injector, that I'm looking to hire is somebody that has to really have that business development mindset, that they understand. They have to have an entrepreneurial spirit themselves because we're building something out of nothing. And I have to believe that I know on day one, I'm not going to have a full book of patients to see. I'm going to try to, but it's not likely. It's going to be a growth. And so I am willing and I'm interested in helping build the business. And I understand that I'm going to need to participate in some maybe marketing efforts and, really lean into patient retention efforts and just everything that goes into building it. If I'm injector number 3, I'm hired because this practice has a full book of patients coming in. We've got 2 other injectors fully at capacity or almost there. We've got an overflow. I literally am being paid to show up and perform treatments. There's not a right or wrong, but there are the people we're hiring are going to fit in one of those buckets. And if I get the wrong person or the right person at the wrong time, we're all unhappy. So I could find a world-class injector who is a culture fit and I adore, but if I hire her as my first person and she's never had to build up a patient following, I'm going to have a mismatch in expectations and she's going to be disappointed and I'm going to be disappointed because it just wasn't the right time. I needed to have a full book of patients for her to treat before I was ready to hire her. So I think it's really important to be clear on who I need right now in my business.
I love that because you'll need all those people. It's just a question of when.
Exactly.
And in what order. And I think that's also part of what overwhelms people is this is a bit of an art, a bit of a science, and a bit of a see what works because you may not know what you want. You may want that person that is entrepreneurial and will build up the book of business, but maybe it's not the right time. Or maybe you want that person who, can fill the capacity, but that's not actually what you need, right? It's like, it's what you want because you're feeling like, oh, the sooner I can offload this, the better. But what you actually need is somebody in marketing to bring in the leads, like before you shift that responsibility. It's a lot of this chess game of just moving things around. But I wanted to ask you, when a practice owner comes to you, I find often people are aware that it's almost like a medical appointment where they say like they're aware they're in pain. They don't know why. So talk to me about how you unravel maybe the causes rather than the symptoms of these people issues, whether it be, they just say, oh, well, my providers are leaving. I feel like I'm overpaying them. I'm just frustrated. Like they feel all these things, but how do you kind of get to the crux of like, it's a culture problem or it's a comp problem or it's no, you're doing everything right and it's their fault, which it never is.
It rarely is, yeah.
It's just an a-hole you hired, so you have a hiring problem, right? So like, how do you kind of diagnose or at least identify like what to treat first for them?
Yeah. It's not always super clear and black and white as we want it to be. But when we work with a practice like that, it's why we start with a very comprehensive assessment. And we go on site because there's a lot I can learn by looking at reports and asking for some feedback and filling out surveys. And then the amount I learn from like actually sitting there and talking to people face to face, sitting at the front desk and watching the workflow as patients check in and out, following a provider through a consultation. I mean, I absorb so much more information and you see it all in context and not just little facts in a vacuum. So that's how I approach it in terms of I just want to go immerse myself and see everything. And then I start looking at the specific issues and I try to put them in buckets. Is this a people problem or is it a process problem? And probably the easiest diagnostic test is if you fixed the person. If you think it's a people problem and it's like, I just got the wrong person in the seat doing the job. If that person were gone tomorrow, if I could replace them, get rid of them, or magically make them better overnight, does the problem go away? If the problem goes away, then maybe it's a people problem. But if the problem persists, or if I look back and I've had 3 people in that seat and I have the same problem, that's much more likely it's a process issue. And so a lot of times we love to throw people either under the bus, and then where we like to throw people at problems and say, just fix it, when really we just need a really well-defined process in place. So I'll give you an example. I had a practice that had gone through patient coordinators. This was a plastic surgeon, went through several patient coordinators, and they just were all bad at converting, right? They just were terrible, and I just had the wrong person, and I just need to keep hiring until I find that unicorn who just knows how to sell. Well, the reality was there had been no formal process in place on how do we respond to leads. What does that conversation sound like? What's the criteria? How do we book them? How do we follow up with them, right? A process, a lead management process, a consultation process didn't exist. It was just whatever the person in the job at the time thought was best to do. I won't even get into pricing at the moment, but that's also a component of it, right? Are they priced appropriately? But there was no process in place, and we just kept throwing people in and telling them to figure it out. Didn't even have a clear benchmark on what was a good conversion rate, right? What we were expecting from them. And then just when the surgeon just perceived they weren't doing a good enough job, we need to replace them. We could just keep hiring, and sure, we might find somebody who could do okay in that role, but that was not a people issue as much as it was a process problem. So we need to dig in, create the process, and then find the right person to sit in the seat and complete it. So that's kind of that diagnostic of where I start of, does it go away if there's a new person in the role?
And that kind of goes in line with the setting expectations, right? Because it should be on the practice that here's what good looks like and here's what we expect you to do. And to the extent that you're saying, well, they're supposed to just figure it out. I'm like, well, ambiguous guidance gets you ambiguous results. So if you want specific results out of them, you've got to give specific rules of how to get it done. It's like, well, they should know. And I compare it to, you can hire the most skilled chef on the planet. They don't know your effing recipe. Exactly. So if you hire them for your restaurant, they don't know how to cook the special burger. They've never heard of that before. Mm-hmm. You've got to break that down for them. Even if they could be Michelin star in New York, it's like, sorry, you're in Chicago now, and now you work at this place. It's a different context. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't mean it's a wrong problem. It just means like you haven't taught them the recipe.
Yeah. It's not unlike medical specialties, right? You could be an aesthetic medicine physician. You could be a plastic surgeon. You could be a dermatologist. And if I want you to look at my nephrology lab results, I mean, you might dig deep, right? Go, oh, I studied that in med school and I can, look up research, but you're not going to just know that because that's not your specialty. So I think you're exactly right. And I like the chef analogy quite a bit.
Yeah, I use that a lot. I like food a lot. You guys know I do restaurant stuff all the time. So the other thing that I think about too is I think that people out of fear, most likely, avoid as much as they can the employment relationship with their people. So they'll avoid the W-2, the full-time commitment, it's almost like we're almost kind of those serial daters, right? Like when I was in my 20s dating online, and it was like, I don't want to get too close. I don't want to overcommit because I'm going to get disappointed and I just want to go through another breakup. So I'm only going to like dip my toe in with this. And I feel like that still creates that barrier, right? Like you want their full commitment. You got to give them a full commitment, but it is emotionally exhausting to go all in on an employee, find out they're not the right fit and have to start over again. It drains your energy, and I understand that. So how do we navigate a bit of this? Like, I really want to go all in on these people and give them a chance to succeed. Meanwhile, I am very tired of having to train this over and over again. And can I just make them a 1099 and like keep this, casual without putting a ring on it so that I'm not hurt, they're not hurt, and this is easier to sever if it doesn't work out? Like, do you see that a lot? Do you see that kind of like airing on that, well, can I just make them a contractor so it's easier?
Yeah, I see that a lot. I will say I see it a bit more in the med spa setting
Oh, for
than
sure.
in a derm practice or a plastic surgery practice.
Yeah.
And I get it in concept. I have just not necessarily found it to be any less emotionally draining to terminate a contractor and bring on a new contractor than it is an employee. So I think an element of that is, are we even being fully honest with ourselves by just putting a different label on it, let alone the Department of Labor rules and things on if it's even appropriate
That's
to
my thing.
qualify
Yeah.
them as that? Am I still treating them like an employee and
Yeah.
controlling their work? And a lot of times we are. And so that's my first challenge is, are you really saving yourself that emotional and mental fatigue of having a W-2 employee? Of course, there are some costs associated with a W-2 employee, and that's real. From day one, we're going to have the tax component, the employer side of the taxes, that will increase that expense. But from a benefit standpoint, other things, we can time those out, that's, those don't kick in if we want to plan it that way for 90 days or longer, so
And you could
that,
do part-time. I think people associate
yeah,
employee with an assumed full-time. And I think
yeah,
that's just like a stigma I want to break, that just because they're an employee means they have to work 40 hours a week. That's not true.
no. And there are a lot of people who don't want to work 40 hours a week. In fact, I'm having an increasingly difficult time finding people who do want to work full time. The sweet spot's like 3 days a week. I'm like, sign me up. Where do we find that? But you're absolutely right. They don't have to even it doesn't have to be a benefit conversation if you're looking for 3 or even 4 days a week. And you get to decide, you can still have a full-time employee and not offer benefits. I'm not suggesting you do that long-term, because I do think good, high-quality people are looking for that total package. And so I do think it's an important part of the compensation discussion. But it's also understandable that a younger practice, a newer practice might not have that for a couple of years. And that's okay too.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it also comes down to the hiring process, that you're able to confidently commit to these people because you have done all the right steps to evaluate for the right characteristics of what you're looking for, not just their, I guess, technical skill in what they're doing, but also in their demeanor, their attitude, their growth mindset, you know. And the thing is, you can't just say you want these things and not evaluate them.
Exactly.
This is so important. Do you ever give advice on the interviewing steps and like the hiring criteria as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually do a lot of hiring for practices we work with. We
Oh,
can
that's great.
support it just from a consulting side, and or we will actually like run the job post. So we'll post the job, do the screening interviews, weed out, the hours and hours that you spend reading resumes, meeting people for the first time, knowing within 30 seconds, no way, this is not my person. So we do all that front end. So the goal there is just to find really good quality people for the practice owner then to meet, interview, and then we will help facilitate the offer and onboarding process. So the reason we started doing that is a couple. One, we know that it's very time consuming to look for a new employee. And it also, isn't necessarily what every practice owner is skilled at doing. So where I start, in fact, I had a call just earlier today with a practice owner that's looking to hire a manager. And so that's a really important decision. And that's not just, sure, let me post the job and get going. Like, I've had 2 hours of conversations now to really get to understand the personality of this practice owner, what she's looking for, what drives her crazy, where she knows her strengths are and her blind spots are. And thankfully, she's very self-aware. She was able to tell me, she goes, Amy, I'm a very direct, no nonsense person. And sometimes I make people cry. And I'm not trying to make people cry. That's just how it comes out. I need a manager who gets that, who's not going to take it personally, but who also can filter it to the rest of the team so that they don't cry. And I said, well, you're very self-aware. And now I have a very good idea now of who I'm looking for in the interview process. Somebody who can accept that direct feedback, not take it personally, but then also communicate it in a different manner. So being clear on who they're working with, what personality style is important, as well as what skill set they need to have coming into it. And then we tailor questions around it. I mean, listen, if you're not using AI, you're wasting time. I was able to take all of my notes and thoughts and transcript from this call, plus the job description, plus everything I know about the practice, and ask AI to help me tailor some screening questions that are really going to get into the core of what she described she needed. And it came up with questions. I'm like, oh gosh, I hadn't thought about that. I like that one.
Oh, it's really good.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so use tools like that to help you to know what to ask. And then I'll do the same with the interviews. When I see somebody that I think I like, I'll feed it back through and say, how closely does this person match everything we've described in what we're looking for? Because I'm the first to say, I sometimes fall in love with people who just, got a bubbly personality or they're really warm. And then I have to stop and say, but are they really right for this practice at this time? And maybe not. So I like to have a second set of tools like that to gauge my instinct and make sure that I'm on track and thinking objectively.
Yeah, I do the same thing actually with my firm. I kind of preface. I actually talk to my AI beforehand and say, this is what I want to score on. And I want to do a numerical score on a scale of how they did in these areas. And I run all of that data through and I say, give me the scorecard the way you see it and why. And I'm not saying I take that and just go process it and go do it, but I take that to kind of give me some accountability on, oh, I really liked that person and they gave them a 2 out of 5. Why? And it's like, they didn't actually demonstrate any of these skills. You guys just talks about God knows what for 10 minutes and seems like you really like her personality wise, but I don't see the skills here. And it kind of catches your bias a little bit to say hey, objectively, I didn't see her demonstrate these skills. You probably marked it as great because you're assuming, oh, well, she's got to be good at that. She was a really nice person. She must be really good at sales. And it's no, you have to actually evaluate for those things.
Exactly. And I also would say it's why interviewing should never be a hire on the spot kind of process. I do believe in multiple interviews. And so again, when we work with the practice, we'll do that initial screening interview. They're recorded, so you get to watch it before you even agree if you want to bring them in for your second interview, which is also a big time saver. But then once they meet in person, there's often still a few unanswered questions afterwards, and we'll kind of debrief about it. And I'll say, well, let me talk to them again and finalize these things. Or I get to be another, hey, wanted to check in. You met, Dr. So-and-so, what did you think? And I get initial, what their vibe is. And I'm like, oh, great. I heard some really positive, couple follow-up questions. And it's a really good way to go back in and tie up any loose ends or dig more into anything that was a little bit unclear. I would never hire on the spot. And I know sometimes we feel desperate and we're just we need somebody now. But the wrong person is going to cost you so much more in time, energy, money, distraction than waiting an extra week or two to make sure this is the absolute right person. I'm not saying I want to draw out the process, but I do want to make sure I'm doing that due diligence and getting the right person.
Yeah, guys, go back 30 seconds and replay that.
Everything
she just said. Everything she just said.
Yeah.
So Amy, here's another thing. This is what most people may not know about you listening, but you've held a lot of different roles in these clinics, right? Talk to me about that and your experience, because I want to know where you're seeing the actual money leaks and opportunities for improvement based on the roles that you've held.
Yeah. So I started working in a plastic surgery office when I was 18 years old. I was an undergrad in college and it was just a part-time job. I like to say I was back prior to anybody having an EMR. I was, pulling paper charts in the file room. I was in medical records. And fast forward almost 25 years later, I've never left the industry. And I'm incredibly grateful for those early opportunities. So I worked in plastic surgery offices, med spa. I worked in private practice, hospital-based practices, academic center. So really seeing the full breadth of aesthetic medicine and doing everything from front desk, insurance authorizations, medical billing, management, patient care coordinator, marketing. And so I think that all certainly helps me today as a consultant really understand how a practice works, and not just how it works on paper or what other people describe, but having been in it, understanding the workflows in each role. And then, so to your question, how does that help me know where like the revenue leaks are, the money leaks? Well, it's in all of the hundreds of little inefficiencies that happen in a practice. Everybody has those little areas that some will acknowledge it's inefficient, others have no idea, but it's like, well, but it's okay that we keep this manual spreadsheet that's completely duplicative of our CRM and our EMR.
It takes 3 hours a week to maintain.
Exactly. But it makes me feel better.
Yeah, but I
get
like
it. But
it.
makes you feel better. That time does equal money, right? And the time you're spending doing that is actually a drain on the practice. There's a lot of time drains that we see, and how that will manifest as your business grows is now we need more people to get the job done, because everybody's got a few of these little tasks that are taking up this extra time that's now leading us to bigger headcount. I mean, that's your number one expense, are your people. I'm not saying we don't have a little bit of margin on our people, but almost everybody, if you sat down and like did a time study or watch what they do every day, you'll find hours of work that are being spent inefficiently. Anybody that has an insurance component to their practice, I know it's not the most popular topic, but I see a ton of inefficiencies in the whole billing and prior authorization process. If your person is telling you, but I just like to call and get someone on the phone and hear them say there's no prior authorization required, they sat on the phone for 45 minutes to have somebody tell that, when it's in the payer policy that I can look up online, or there's a payer portal that I can fill it out in 3 minutes or less and get it to spit back to me. But because I really like this person and she feels more comfortable having somebody tell her, we allow her to continue to make those phone calls. So we've got to look for all of those opportunities, find ways to bring them along. We've got to grow. We've got to continue to modernize our practice. This is where we find those efficiencies that will save us money.
Totally agree. And I like to say it is those like tiny little leaks. It's the like little micro holes, not there's no one big giant gap that you're looking for. And the same thing when we're analyzing a practice is we try to go from top down. So we'll zoom out for a second and say, what area of your practice is the biggest constraint for your growth? And then we keep like double clicking. It's almost like a Google Maps where you go like closer and then closer and then closer, and then you're on the street and you can see people. And it's just one layer closer to the problem every time once we figure out where that constraint is. And the same goes with people, culture, operations, is you have to figure out one at a time, where are those different clogs happening? But there's not one. It's a series of a ton of small ones that as you unlock them, you get to grow.
That's right. And when we work with practices, I will always start with saying, there's probably nothing I'm going to bring up that you aren't already aware of. Every now and then there's something that they're completely surprised about, but and there's never one major problem and one solution that's going to fix everything. It's 1,000 little things and they all need attention. And that's overwhelming, right? As a business owner, you're like, oh my gosh, we all want it to be one thing, because even if it's hard to fix the one thing, we fix it and we move on. It's not. It's hundreds of things that are going on. And so when we work with you, we talk about how do we first prioritize it? What is either low-hanging fruit that's like the easiest fix, we just get it done and move on, and or has the biggest financial and or cultural impact on the practice. And so we want to prioritize, where do we start? And then because we can't address everything at once, we put together an action plan and time it out. And then honestly, we end up being a lot like your personal trainer, where, you have the plan, right? We can all go out online and get any diet and exercise plan under the sun. There's nothing new there. It doesn't mean I'm going to show up to the gym and actually pick up the weight. And so we are that personal trainer that's going to meet with you and say, okay, time to pick up the weight. this is our next thing to tackle. Let's work through it. So we're just really providing that accountability as well as guidance, right? A personal trainer is going to adjust your form. They're going to tell you, no, do this weight, not that. Let's do it in this order. Same thing. We're going to make sure that we're walking alongside you, doing it with you, making adjustments along the way so that you're not flying blind, but it keeps you on schedule and give you a structured approach as to, what things to address and in what order.
And connects that plan to your goals, right? And kind of hold you accountable to saying, well, that was your goal. And you sleeping in on a Monday ain't going to get you closer to that goal. So let's get your ass up. So I actually use the same analogy, but I like to say, I can get you dressed. I can get you to the gym. I can pick out your outfit, right? Yeah. I can do all the things I can do. I can wake you up and be your alarm. I cannot do the burpees for you.
Yeah. I wish you could, because I really hate burpees, Shannon.
Me too. No, like that's the one thing I'm like, I can't. The one thing you can't outsource is the thing that you got to do. And I think that's a big lesson for business owners is like you can outsource so many different things. You can offload so many different things. But ultimately, you got to be accountable to your own decisions. You got to be accountable to running the practice and setting culture. Yeah. And those things that matter the most, that impact your practice the most, are the things you got to own.
That's right. And that's the joy and the drawback of being a business owner. You get all of that responsibility.
All the control and all of the obligation.
That's right. That's
to maintain it. Amy, this has been so much fun. Where can people find out more about you and your practice in case they want to get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So our website is acgpracticepartners.com. There's a contact form there. It comes straight to me, gives you an opportunity to schedule time to meet with me. That's complimentary. Would love to, learn more about your practice and just what your pain points are. There's absolutely no obligation to move forward. And then on Instagram, are at ACG Practice Partners or at Amy Anderson MBA. Trying to put out lots of content to keep you guys educated and in the know.
Love it. Guys, all that will be in the show notes, links to everything. Go give her a follow. She's got some amazing content. Amy, thanks again for joining today.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for tuning into today's episode. If it left you feeling inspired to take action, make sure to check out our free video series that walks you through the same framework that we use as a CFO team to identify what's holding a practice back from growth and how to fix it. Links in the show notes. See you on the next episode.